be here. My goodness, this room, the whole new look of CTIA, it says a lot. You should also know that Meredith has been doing a heck of a job in her short tenure, and she's already making things happen at the FCC. I mean, she's personally responsible for getting the entire FCC to take the Ice Bucket Challenge. Yeah, you applaud. Thanks a lot, Meredith. I was on vacation, and can you imagine the challenge of risking shock trauma in the middle of a vacation over social media? But this is what Meredith challenged us all to, and it was a great thing that she did and a great idea. You know, it was 10 years ago that I last stood on this stage. Things have changed a great deal since then. As I told the Senate Commerce Committee during my confirmation hearing, I hope I was a pretty good representative of this industry in its nascent years. But today I have a new client, the American people. And I will bring to bear for that client every ounce of whatever capabilities I may have and whatever understanding I may have of the wireless industry to aggressively represent the best interests of my client. This industry has evolved a great deal from a luxury service used for phone calls to what you just heard Meredith and Dan talking about, a must-have service used for just about everything. Texting your friends, emailing your office, taking pictures, sharing pictures, watching videos, listening to music, tracking news, getting directions, and oh yes, making a phone call. In the process, this industry has shaped significant changes in both our economy and our society. Who would have imagined the kind of numbers that Meredith was just putting up? 750,000 new jobs stemming from the mobile app economy. Who would have imagined the manner in which non-voice service have transformed the way all of us live our lives? You have done this with vision and entrepreneurial spirit, with capital and management, with risk-taking and grit, and with the people's most precious asset, the public's spectrum. You've created new times. And as Lincoln said, as our case is new, so must we think anew and act anew. So today, I'd like to think anew and to think out loud about your great industry. I'm not here to pound the table with some kind of regulatory dictates, but to begin a discussion and suggest paths to explore to our mutual benefit, and more importantly, for the benefit of your subscribers and our constituents. In particular, I want to highlight today 3 topics: competition, net neutrality, and the incentive auction. So let's start with competition. Last week, I laid out an agenda for broadband competition. The first principle of that agenda is that where competition exists, the Commission must protect it. This industry has always told policymakers, we're different, we're competitive. But in the last couple of years, the FCC and the Department of Justice have had to be poised to intervene to protect that dynamic. First, it was the AT&T's proposed acquisition of T-Mobile, and most recently, the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust and I were outspoken in discouraging Sprint's potential acquisition of T-Mobile. And the American consumer is the beneficiary of new pricing and new services that have been spurred by competition. Now, I know that achieving scale is good economics, and that there's a natural economic incentive to accrue ever-increasing scale. But we will continue to be skeptical of efforts to achieve that scale through the consolidation of major players. The second principle is that where competition can exist, we'll encourage it. The market-based reserve of low-band spectrum in the incentive auction is just such an effort. And overarching these principles is the belief that competition creates stronger inducements to innovation than does regulation. Meredith was just talking about how the United States is the world leader in LTE. That's because of competition. I remember when the rest of the world looked down on the US because we didn't have a standardized air interface. At the time, I kept saying that our competition would produce results better than the governmental standards of Europe. And it did. But the inverse is also true. The absence of meaningful competition invites government regulation. We have more than 100 years of experience with this model. And here's the history-based takeaway. What industry does to create a robust and competitive market has a bearing on how government responds. The mobile industry has proven that competition drives capital investment. Equally important, you've shown that competition and investment are not mutually exclusive. As Meredith said, in the past 10 years, you've invested $260 billion to build competitive infrastructure. You're living proof that profit and progress can go hand in hand. But of course, any discussion of competition leads to the issue of leveraging control over last mile networks to impact the rest of the internet ecosystem. In other words, the whole concept of an open internet. One of the great facilitators of competition for online services is the open design of the internet. I remember when this industry was united around the walled garden, where the only apps that reached the consumer were those that the carrier approved, usually in return for a payment. That wasn't a good environment for innovation, or the expansion of consumer services, or the industry for that matter. The fast pace of technology, which we have been discussing, effectively destroyed those walls. Once the world went IP, it was possible to leap the garden wall and discover the abundance of the open ecosystem. And just look at the results. But it's instructive that the walled garden existed despite multi-carrier competition. At least in the short run, this suggests that competition does not assure openness. In 6 days, the comment period for the Commission's proceeding to restore the open internet protections that were vacated by the Verizon lawsuit will close. Everyone has said they support a free and open internet. Meredith repeated that again this morning. Many companies say that they enforce the 2010 rules even in their absence. I'm confident that those endorsements are genuine. But the American people want assurances, and so do I. Our goal in this proceeding is to establish the rules of the road for internet openness that will provide certainty in the marketplace and facilitate the continuation of the virtuous cycle of investment and innovation. As evidenced by the growth in this industry over the past decade, mobile wireless broadband is a key component of that virtuous cycle. And although the comment period at the Commission has not yet closed, we are already closely examining the issues and the record that is being developed. And one of the constant themes on that record is how consumers increasingly rely on mobile broadband as an important pathway to access the internet. You heard Dan Mead this morning talking about 55% of people access the internet through their mobile device. Microsoft, in their submission in the Open Internet proceeding, told the Commission that we live in what they call a mobile-first world. And as a result, and I want to quote this, as a result, Microsoft said, there is no question that mobile broadband access services must be subject to the same legal framework as fixed broadband access services. Thousands of consumers, tens of thousands of consumers have echoed that sentiment in our proceeding. As Meredith referenced, the Commission's previous open internet rules distinguish between fixed and mobile, and our tentative conclusion in this new rulemaking suggested the Commission should maintain the same approach going forward. In this proceeding, however, we recognize that there have been significant changes in the mobile marketplace since 2010, when the vacated rules were put in place. We sought comment about whether these changes should lead us to revise the treatment of mobile broadband services. The basic issue that is raised is whether the old assumptions upon which the 2010 rules were based match the new realities. Here's a sample of the kinds of issues that get raised in this context. For instance, what's the impact of LTE? The service that we've just heard this morning being promoted as offering internet connectivity at faster speeds. Does it make a difference that when the rules were vacated by the Verizon case, when the rules that were written but were vacated by the Verizon case, LTE had 200,000 subscribers. And today there are 120 million LTE subscribers, with build-out complete to 300 million. What's the impact of the dramatic switch to smart devices for wireless internet access, highlighted by an event going on in another venue at this very time? Now, CTI has recently filed a very thoughtful paper arguing that mobile broadband faces unique operational constraints that make open internet rules inappropriate. And that, too, is one of the questions with which we will have to wrestle. Part of the open internet proceeding is also the consideration of reasonable network management. Of course, a network operator should be able to use techniques to manage the network. The importance of engineering and technical management tools is obvious, and it has been recognized by the Commission. But recently I sent a letter to the 4 national wireless providers asking them about their network management practices. We are very concerned about the possibility that some customers are being singled out for disparate treatment, even though they've paid for the capacity that is being throttled. And we're equally concerned that customers may have been led to purchase devices relying on the promise of unlimited usage, only to discover after the device purchase that they were subject to throttling. I'm hard-pressed to understand how either practice, much less the two together, could be a reasonable way to manage a network. Our open internet proceeding will look closely at both the question of what is reasonable and the related subject of how network management practices can be transparent to both consumers and edge providers. I'm sure that the next round of comments that are due on September 15th will provide additional insight to all these questions, and we look forward to CTIA's involvement and feedback. And I expect that what we're talking about here will be a leading topic at the Open Internet Roundtable that is being conducted by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau on September 16th, in which CTIA is participating. Finally, and with apologies to Teddy Roosevelt, our greatest public asset is that which we cannot see: spectrum. Your government has heard your cry for more spectrum. The Congress responded with a creative and courageous solution: an incentive auction to simultaneously buy broadcast spectrum, reband it and the remaining broadcast frequencies, and auction the results to you. This is an incredibly complex, never before attempted undertaking. I noted that Meredith's first public statement upon assuming her new position was the importance of spectrum. And I heard it again this morning. Now, as you know, the National Association of Broadcasters recently sued the FCC to challenge our rules for the auction. If they were to win, the effect would be to delay the auction, notwithstanding NAB's claims to the contrary. We are confident that the courts will find that we have carried out the mandate of Congress and that the NAB's arguments are groundless. However, the fact of the matter is that they have gone to the judicial branch to throw up roadblocks to further progress on addressing the spectrum needs of mobile service. So let's talk Turkey. Many broadcasters have been led to believe that the demand for mobile spectrum really isn't as your industry has claimed. As a result, they believe that wireless carriers won't fully participate in the auction. Whether or not wireless carriers show up with sufficient demand to incent broadcasters to participate is something only you control. But if that is the case, if mobile operators don't put their money where their mouths have been, the future of spectrum policy will begin to look a lot different. One of our best hopes for continuing progress in spectrum allocation is the ability of an incentive auction to find a meeting point for all parties' economic needs. When the broadcast incentive auction is a success, it will be a template for multiple other incentive auctions to follow. And the inverse is also true. We're heartened by AT&T's and Dish's strong expression of interest in the incentive auction. We saw reports of big interest and big numbers being tossed around when Sprint and T-Mobile wanted to bid jointly. The rest of the industry, however, has been strangely silent. In the next few weeks, we will begin expanded outreach to broadcasters so that they understand how the auction works, including estimates of potential opening bid amounts. We've been explaining that what we believe is the economic potential that the auction represents. However, they read the trade press too. And wireless carriers showing interest in the incentive auction is the predicate to broadcasters showing interest in the auction. So it's great to be back at CTIA. It's great to stand here and talk about our challenges. Yes, the challenges are great, but the opportunities are greater. And I look forward to working with you, working with CTIA, working with Meredith to find solutions that will enable new waves of mobile innovation that will improve the lives of all Americans. Thank you very much for inviting me.